السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Muhammad, do you know if Ahmed's joining? Because you were saying he was available last time, yesterday. Okay, here he is. طيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Last class, we wrapped up the chapter of wudu, and the next is the al-a'yan al-tahira wal-najisa. So the uh, pure and impure in terms of physical things, al-a'yan. The physical impurities are obviously different than the ahdath. We discussed that ahdath, things that break wudu, are incidents. They are things that occur in a specific, time period, such as passing gas or urinating. These are, apart from, for example, urine being a physical impurity, it's the time-related event. It's the incident itself which breaks wudu, as opposed to a physical impurity. A physical impurity would uh, affect the state of purity and the state of the correctness of salah, of tawaf, regardless of whether a specific incident happened. So it does not have to come from the person himself or herself. It can be from a external thing. You can sit on it, you can step on it on the road, it can fall on you from a rooftop or a window, etc. And this is the difference between these two types of impurities, even though they both affect salah in the same way, as long as the person is aware of it. They have different causes. Now, the najasa, or the list of things that are najis, is what's focused on, even though the chapter is called al-a'yan al-tahir wal-najisa, or at least that's how it's called in Aqrab al-Masalik. In Tadrib, he changes it a bit. He doesn't actually tell you what is pure, what is clean. And the reason is it is much easier to just list what is impure, because the default of all things is that they are tahir until proven najis. So it's much easier to just list what is najis. A lot of them are pertaining to food, meaning what? Meaning that the animal, whatever animal it is, has certain rulings pertaining to whether or not it can be slaughtered, and if it is slaughtered correctly or not, what parts of it are used and what parts of it are not. A lot of what is to be discussed is pertaining to these animals. Are they correctly slaughtered or not, etc. And therefore, you'll find what is in this chapter is going to repeat it. A lot of it is going to be, not all of it, but the vast majority of it will be repeated elsewhere, not just in this book, but generally speaking in books. And that is in the book of hunting. And where does that come? It comes after the chapter of Hajj, because when Hajj ends, that is when hunting is permissible for the Hujjaj, and that is when the fuqaha discuss what can be hunted and what cannot be, and the uh, implications of that for tahara najasa. طيب. He says رحمه الله كل مسكر من المائعات نجس. Every intoxicant from the liquids المائعات is najis, is impure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as everyone knows, has forbidden khamr. What is khamr? Khamr, as is known to most people, is alcohol, generally speaking, whether it is wine or beer or vodka or rum or whatever. If it's made from dates, if it's made from grapes, if it's made from wheat, this is all khamr, according to the Malikiya and most of the fuqaha. Some scholars, not just fuqaha, but also linguists, will tell you that khamr in the Arabic language only refers to alcohol made from grapes or dates. And that's not to say that anything else is permissible. It's just the discussion of what is khamr and what is also haram because it's similar to khamr, but it's not khamr itself. Now, the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, كل مسكر خمر وكل خمر حرام. And this is the evidence that the Malikiya use and most of the fuqaha. He says, every intoxicant is khamr and every khamr is haram. So we use this as a basis that every single thing that intoxicates is khamr and every khamr is haram, meaning to drink or to benefit from. So whatever the source of the alcohol is, it is najis. Now, he says here, كل مسكر من المائعات نجس. He says, every intoxicant from the liquids, المائعات, is najis. Meaning, the word khamr, even though in the hadith it is referring to all intoxicants, while we affirm the impermissibility of all these intoxicants, such as even the solid ones, such as, in the modern day, they create all these industrial things such as heroin, such as cocaine, such as all these solid things. Even though they are impermissible, they don't technically fall under the word of khamr. They're muskirat, they're intoxicants, but they're not khamr. And therefore, they are not physically impure. Meaning, if you have something like that, stuck to your shoe for whatever reason, or in your wallet, as some reports say that the vast majority of US dollars have some trace amounts of cocaine on them. So it is relevant to most people. Um, the fact is that they do not constitute physical impurities, even if it is impermissible to, use them, to consume them. Now, this poses a question that is also very relevant to almost everyone. If all liquid forms of alcohol are impure, what does that say about using things such as hand sanitizer, using things such as spray perfumes, which all contain alcohol, using um, many other skincare products, or not necessarily skincare, but just generally things applied to the surface of the body? Many things contain alcohol that are used quite often. And the simple answer is they are all impermissible, at least in the mainstream, opinion of the madhab. What most of the fuqaha do is they take the rukhsa, they take the opinion of the Hanafis, who deem it permissible, simply because of how common and widespread it is and how difficult it might be to avoid it in the modern day. And the reason the Hanafis view it as permissible is, like I said previously, they view drinking, the impermissibility of drinking is only for alcohol made from dates um, dates and grapes. If alcohol is made from wheat, barley, potatoes, whatever, then it is not khamr. However, they would say that if you use it to the extent that you get drunk, then you will ta'zir will be applied to you. So a form of punishment would be applied to you if you purposely or by accident get drunk from excessive use. Therefore, these modern day alcohol, these what they call medical alcohol, or at least in Arabic they do, these things that exist in perfumes, that exist in sanitizers, that exist in lotions, whatever, sunscreen, anything that might have some trace amounts of alcohol, all of them, or none of them come from grapes or dates. And therefore, according to them, it would be permissible to, use it uh, in the relevant, usages of them. And therefore, we the fatwa of them would be that it is permissible to use, and therefore it's only the Hanafi madhab which would allow them to be used, these products that we just mentioned. And as I said, most fuqaha just take the rukhsa of them, um, at least within the context of the four madhab. Outside the context of the four madhab, you have the Salafi movement who uses the fatwa of Rashid Rida. Rashid Rida, the famous, modernist reformist who lived in the early 1900s. He has a fatwa, talking about just reinventing the wheel basically for alcohol, and that's what people like Ibn Uthaymeen and Ibn Baz would use in their fatwa. Now, in terms of the physical impurities, or sorry, the physical forms of khamr, we treat the physical, by physical I mean solid. I should have said solid, not physical. We treat the solid intoxicants the way that Hanafis would treat alcohol made of um, things not from dates or grapes. So as we said, they view khamr as dates and grapes. If you use alcohol from barley or from wheat, then you do not the had is not applied to you. The prescribed punishment is not applied to you if you drink it. However, ta'zir, meaning a non-prescribed punishment at the discretion of the judge, would be applied to you if you get drunk from it. This is similar to how we treat these solid intoxicants. So if you consume marijuana or some of these things that intoxicate, they the had is not applied to you. There's no prescribed punishment for you because it does not fall under the definition of khamr, because our definition has to be liquid. However, ta'zir is applied to you. So a non-prescribed punishment at the discretion of the judge would be applied basically how he sees fit. Anyways, we can go into more detail about that when we get to the hudud. There's much more details to be discussed. So this is the first form of physical impurity. Any intoxicant from a liquid, whatever its source may be, if it intoxicates and is a liquid, then it is impure. Now, what is the exact definition of intoxicates? Because the effect of alcohol is a little different than the effect of maybe a strong cough syrup or the effect of some other form of tranquilizer or sedative. Many of them they're all liquids and they're all considered by people to be some form of effect on the mind, some form of making the mind go to sleep. However, the effects of them can be a little different. So in the sharh of Tadrib al-Salik, he says, ما يغيب العقل, anything that makes the mind absent. So there's either khamr, the known thing, or there is a mufsid or a muraqqid. So there's three categories. What is the difference between them? He says, وَالْفَرْقُ بَيْنَ الْجَمِيعِ أَنَّ الْمُسْكِرِ, the intoxicant, meaning what is impermissible, like alcohol, هو ما يغيب العقل دون الحواس. It's what makes the mind absent, meaning your cognitive abilities absent, without affecting your senses. Whereas you have the other categories, such as al-mufsid, it is what makes your mind absent. Sorry. Sorry. I mixed up the categories. So he says, الفرق بين الجميع أن المسكر هو ما غيب العقل دون الحواس. So, as I said, it makes your mind absent without the senses, with a sense of um, highness, a sense of happiness that accompanies it. A sense of happiness that doesn't come from a natural source. It just comes with the intoxicant itself. However, al-mufsid, It's what makes the mind absent and doesn't affect the senses. However, it doesn't come with a sense of this upbringing and the sense of highness, such as al-hashisha, as he says, meaning a form of cannabis that would have been used in Egypt, which he is citing. Al-muraqqid, the last category, is something that makes the mind absent with the senses. So some drugs will make your mind absent as well as your physical sensation, your sense of self, your physical awareness of your body and your ability to move around would also be absent. So what is the definition of intoxicant? It is the first one. What makes your mind absent? It keeps your physical senses. And the third condition is that it gives a sense of happiness or, joy. If it doesn't have these three conditions, and for certain things such as, sedatives or all sorts of different drugs that a doctor might prescribe to you or a dentist might inject into you, if it does not have these three conditions, then you do not need to worry about it being khamr. It will be either a mufsid or a muraqqid. So that's something some people worry about when they go into a surgery and you have drugs being applied to them, that they're worried if this is a physical impurity being injected um, into your body, which would be impermissible. Because the Prophet ﷺ heard of a Sahabi who was using khamr, using alcohol as a form of medicine, the exact method of which is not apparent, like it wasn't apparent in the hadith, but he says that this is impermissible. The Sahabi responded that I'm using it as a medicine. I'm not, drinking it. He said, إِنَّمَا هُوَ دَاءٌ لَا دَوَاء. The Prophet ﷺ replied, this is a disease, not a medicine. So, as long as it's not a muskir and doesn't have the three conditions that we mentioned, then it's not something to be worried about. The second category of physical impurities. ومن فصل من أجزاء البري الذي له نفس سائلة قبل ذكاته إلا العرق والمخاط والدمع والريق. So, what is separated from the parts of an animal, basically. An animal includes birds, includes fish, includes insects, any wild thing. But wild thing doesn't mean that it has to be in the wild. Even if it's domesticated in a farm or in a house, it still applies. So what is separated from the parts of this living thing? This is the first condition. The second condition is الذي له نفس سائلة, something that has a nafs sa'ila, a flowing soul. What does that mean? It means that if you kill it, then the blood would flow, as opposed to, for example, certain insects. Certain insects do not have the amount of blood in them that if they were squished, for example, um, like the blood would not flow. They do have blood, obviously, but it's not sa'ila. It's not flowing, because flowing blood is najis. And this applies to 99% of things, living things, that their blood is flowing. Only very certain insects would be exempt. And we're going to get to which ones they are in a bit. So, anything that's separated from the part of the body is considered meta. It's considered dead meat. Even if the animal itself has not been killed, if I chop off the leg of a sheep, and the sheep is still alive, that leg is dead meat, it's meta. Even if the sheep is still alive, I can't use or benefit from that leg that has been chopped off. Similarly, if I chop off skin, if I chop off the tongue or whatever. قبل ذكاته, if I chop it off before it is slaughtered. Obviously, if you slaughter the animal correctly, then all of its body is permissible to use, eat. You can use the leather, you can use um, the bones, whatever you need. إلا العرق والمخاط والدمع والريق. So you can't benefit from anything that is separated from the animal of the body of an animal if it's not slaughtered, except sweat, mucus, uh, tears, and saliva. And the reason these four things are exempt is because these things are not considered part of the animal to begin with. Um, and in Aqrab al-Masalik, in the original text, the way this is explained is a little different. The thing is that any living animal, yes, including dogs, including pigs, any living thing is pure. It's physically pure, including, as long as it's alive, obviously, including, so any animal is tahir, including its sweat. So the sweat of any animal is tahir. The mucus of any animal is tahir. The tears of any animal is tahir. The saliva of any animal is tahir. And there's an additional thing he doesn't mention, which is the eggs. The eggs of any animal are tahir, as long as they have not gone rotten. And the last two, another two are al-balgham. So phlegm is of any animal is pure, and the safra. The safra is the yellow bile, which is a something that would exist sort of in the stomach or in the guts of the animal. So these things that I mentioned, so these four and the other three that I added, these seven things are pure if they leave any animal, even if it's removed. It's not considered meta because it's pure. However, the regular parts of the animal that you would actually want to use, such as the meat, the bones, they cannot be removed before its death, before it's being slaughtered. Otherwise, it is meta. وَإِذَا مَاتَ, if it dies. So this is, we were talking about what is removed before it dies. However, if it dies, meaning on its own, it's not slaughtered. If it dies on its own, فَجَمِيعَ أَجْزَائِهِ نَجِسًا, all of it is najis, except for الشعر, the hair, والوبر والصوف وزغب الريش. So hair, wabar, wabar is basically something similar to hair. Um, it exists on certain animals such as camels. والصوف, the wool off of a sheep or any other animal that has wool. وزغب الريش. زغب الريش is it's a fluffy thing that it exists under feathers. Uh, I think in English it's called downing or something. If one of you knows, you can write it down. So these things, even if the animal dies, are considered pure. And the reason why is because they are not considered alive to begin with. So even when the animal is alive, these parts are not considered alive. There's no, the life isn't in them. So when the animal dies, there's no reason for these to be considered meta as well, because they were never considered alive to begin with, as opposed to the bones, the skin, the meat. These are considered part of the actual life of the animal. And some of the other fuqaha from outside the madhab would also add horns, the horns of a bull or a deer. They also add this. They consider it not alive. This is close to the truth, even though it's not part of the madhab. Uh, or at least modern biology would point us in this way that horns are never alive, and therefore they can't be considered meta when they die. طيب, let's just take a 2-minute break for the adhan. Just occurred to me that the microphone was not plugged in, so I hope you guys have not had trouble hearing anything. Just give me a second to plug it in. That should be better for you guys. Wait. It goes on to list some things that are also najis. He says, وَمِنَ النَّجِسِ السَّوْدَاء وَالْقَيْحُ وَالصَّدِيدُ. So, السوداء is black bile. We mentioned yellow bile before. Those of you unfamiliar with what this means, before before the modern era where bodily fluids were a little more precisely categorized, doctors back then would categorize them into what are called the four humors, and therefore we inherit this understanding of what is najis based on this more broad categorization of black bile, rather the more modern, um, precise categorization of, black bile might be divided into a few different liquids and a few different substances within the body, but we consider all of them najis as a whole. And in terms of the four humors, yellow bile, black bile, um, I don't remember the names of the other one. There's something red, and then there's phlegm. Uh, the way the fuqaha decided what is najis and what is not from amongst them is by considering what contains blood and what does not from amongst them, because blood is najis, so they considered black bile, according to what they understood from medicine, that black bile is mostly blood, or at least contains enough blood to make it najis. So all of these different fluids are considered najis. Al-qayh wal-sadid are basically pus. They're both the same thing. The different words are applied to the different forms of it. So it can come in, depending on the injury or um, the burn that is on the skin. The pus might come out of the skin in a more clear, transparent, and um, uh, thin liquid, whereas sometimes it might come as a more yellowish and a more viscous substance. But they're both considered najis. They're both the same thing, regardless of the form they come in. And similar to black bile, the reason they are considered najis is because they originate from blood, or at least interact with it in some way, mix with it in some way. With them, so blood itself is najis. ولو من سمك أو ذباب أو قمل. He lists, he says, even if it is from fish or flies or lice. Why is he, making sure that people know these three? Why does he not say blood, even if it's from a bear or a cat or a elephant? The reason is because, first of all, samak, fish, uh, the dead fish is considered pure. As we discussed, we discussed the hadith that any meta, any dead meat from the ocean is considered pure. So many people think because you can find a dead fish and eat it, that means that the blood in it must also be pure. And to be fair, some fuqaha might actually make this argument, but it is not the mu'tamad in the madhab. It is a second view, but it's not the mu'tamad. And therefore, the blood of the fish, it's still najis. Um, Similarly, dubab, flies, and lice. We mentioned earlier that for something to be najis, it has to be dhu nafsin sa'il. It has to have a flowing nafs. It has to have flowing blood when it is killed. Some people think that dhubab, flies, and qaml, lice are considered, um, you know, are considered from this category. They consider that if you kill a fly, it does not have flowing blood. But the fuqaha decided that it is considered an animal of flowing blood, and similarly, lice is an animal of flowing blood. So that's why these are, you know, the author wanted to make sure that these are understood. والمذي والودي والمني من كل حيوان. So المذي والمدي والمني are the liquids or fluids that might come um, out of someone's private parts. So he's making sure that you know that every single animal, it's najis from every single animal. It's not just humans. So if you come into contact with the, you know, semen of a horse or a sheep, it is still impure. And this is relevant to someone who might be working on a farm. والبول والغائط من محرم أو مكروه. So the urine and the feces when it comes to animals, obviously, as we know, it is impure when it comes to human. Uh, However, when it comes to an animal, there is a classification. If the meat of it, if the meat of that animal is haram, such as such as a pig, then the feces and urine of that animal is also haram. Also, if the meat of that animal is makruh, it is disliked but not necessarily haram, such as a horse or, according to the mashhur, cats and dogs, then it is still impermissible. It is not that haram meat would have haram urine, and then makruh meat has makruh urine. No, both haram and makruh meats have impermissible are najis. Basically, both of them are equally najis. ومن المباح إن استعمل النجاسة ولو ظنا. So when it comes to animals that are permissible to eat, their feces and urine are considered clean, unless they use najasa, meaning they eat najasa, or it is fair enough to assume that najasa is in their system, such as this mainly applies to chickens. Chickens are very filthy in the things that they eat. Sorry. Um, so if the animal is permissible to eat, but it is very likely enough that they ate najasa, then it's fair to assume that that najasa is in their own najasa. Therefore, it would be similar to the other animals. However, if the animal is permissible to eat and it has not come into contact with najasa in terms of eating, such as a sheep who is just eating grass all day, then their defecation is considered, uh, it's not considered najis. Now, this is not to say that you should go eat it, or that it's permissible to eat it, or that, you should come into contact with it. It is just not a najasa that will break your salah if it is on you, or, on your feet or something. وَمِنَ الْآدَمِ إِلَّا الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. So obviously, as we said, human feces is also impure, except if it comes from the prophets or the messengers. They are the exception because their entire bodies and what comes out are all considered tahir. So it's not just the, defecation, but also the blood, the flowing blood of the prophets would be considered tahir as well. وَلَبَنْ الْمُحَرَّمِ. So in terms of milk, the milk of an animal is also muharram if the meat of the animal is muharram. So similar to defecation and urination, the milk, the ruling of the milk is attached to the ruling of the meat. So the milk of, a cow or a camel or a goat are all permissible, whereas the milk of, a pig is impermissible. وَالْمُتَعَفِّنْ مِنَ الْبَيْضِ. As we mentioned earlier, eggs are considered tahir as long as they have not spoiled, or meaning have gone rotten. We'll have less than 1 minute before the Zoom ends. We'll stop here. Let me just highlight it so we don't forget. If anyone has any questions, then as usual, you can speak them now, or you can send a message in the group chat later on. See you all next week.